So I thought of this video idea where I'll give you 5 tips for iRacing that I wish I knew when I first began on the simulators and began playing iRacing. The problem was I couldn't come up with 5 off the top of my head. I had 3. So then I thought, how about we come up with 3 for ACC, 3 for iRacing, combine them together and give you 3 tips I wish I knew for both of them when I first got into those games. Because unlike other games, if you're first stepping into sim racing, it's a pretty there's a lot of knowledge that goes with it. You've got all the hardware first of all, and there's some really high-end rigs out there. The games have this super high skill rating if you want to be really good at it, and not always the easiest to get into. Lots of rules in order to make it competitive, lots of penalties and things like that. So in order to help you avoid them, 3 things I wish I knew, and we'll start off with iRacing. For the background for today's video, I've got up Bathurst in a Ford V8 supercar. Because 1, I haven't been on Bathurst for a while, so I need to keep it up in the ability to drive it. And 2, Bathurst is always cool in my opinion. So let's jump into it. The first thing I wish I knew about iRacing, and I didn't actually make too many errors when it comes to this, but it's one of those hot topics that everyone talks about, and it's the severe cost that iRacing has associated with it. And it's just one of the things you have to really, unless you just avoid it and just never give in to the cost of it. If you want to co-op, if you want to be a part of it, comes with a cost. You've got your membership, which is $100 a year, more if this is Australian dollars, by the way. It's about 80 something. But you can do things like buy it at Black Friday sales and things like that. But more so is the track cost. So that you're looking at $15 US per track every single time, and there's 12 tracks per season, and there's multiple different categories. So if you're looking at doing V8 supercars, you're looking at doing IMSA races, you want to try a few different cars, you've got hundreds of dollars of bills already on top of your membership, and you haven't even sat in the rig yet. So the best thing to do with buying tracks, and that I do, is I like to do it by pen and paper, but there is a website, if I can think of the name of it, associated with this, so it does the same thing. What it does is it lists each category for that season, so the different races that are available, and shows you each track that they're on. What I do then is I just look at them. So if there's 5 categories I want to look at, all in the same realm normally. So maybe you have V8 supercars, IMSA. Maybe you're interested in NASCAR as well. You could write them down, because a couple of the tracks, only a few though, do cross over. And I want you to look at the category, not that you want to get to, not A class, but you know that you're going to be able to get to soon. Because probably every 3 or 6 months you'll do this again where you buy another lot of tracks. And there is a reason why we buy them in lots, and we'll get to that soon. So you circle all of them, and then you either write your top 3 tracks or your top 6, depending on what your budget is. If you've got $100 to blow, then you'll do it in lots of 6, because you'll get a 15% off code if you buy 6 at once, or 10% just automatically applied to your cart if you buy 3. So you cross-reference. It doesn't take that long. It sounds like a lot of work, but you just circle the tracks that you see that come up the most often, and you'll find that a lot of them cross over. 1 for this season, I wrote down 5 categories I'm interested in. 24 hours of Le Mans category, IMSA, V8 supercars, F3, and the VRS sprint. And 5 times in every single category, I've forgotten the name of the track. Either way, the track come up 5 times. So obviously, to get the most bang for my buck when I first start, is I write down number 1, the most use I'll get out of a track. If you don't have any favorites, obviously you have a favorite track, you're gonna buy that straight away. But number 1, for instance, Bathurst, although not all the categories come here. Then we go through and you'll see that a couple of them come up 3 times, such and such, and you have a list of the tracks that you want, and also look at the cars and which ones you can use the most. So for instance, a GT3 car that's available to use in IMSA, you can also use in B class in the VRS sprint, and vice versa, whereas some of them are only capable of running in the 1 series. Now if you're going to dedicate yourself to that series, obviously you're going to buy that, but again, if you're trying to get the most amount of content that you can for the cheapest price, this is what you want to do, because when you first start, there's going to be lots of weeks where you log on, you want to race, you look at the list, and you can't enter any because you either don't own the track, you don't own the car, or you don't own both. So that's tip 1. Tip 2, and I found this out the hard way, is when you get to higher classes of your license. You've got rookie, and then when you finally get enough safety rating for not having as many accidents, then you go up to D, then you got C, B, A, and Pro if you ever get to that level. So I found out, I went to B class, and if you have accidents, the multiplier for how hard it really punishes you is a lot greater. So I come in, I hadn't played for a while, and there was a new update on the tyres, to make excuses, but still, log in on my RSR, B class, enter a race, and I end up getting like max, like I pretty much got ejected from the game because I'd spun out and crashed. I couldn't get used to the tyres coming from ACC and not playing iRacing for a while. It's a particular way you got to drive it a little bit more precisely, I think, in iRacing. Either way, huge amount of multipliers, like 17 or something, which I mean would be hurtful, but especially because it was in B class, it just ruins you. So keep that in mind. If you're just coming back from a holiday or something, better to jump into a lower class race first, like a C class, before you go for the higher ones, just in case you knock up a few of those penalties. And keep in mind, if your strength of field is lower, so if your I rating is lower, that's how you get matched. If you're getting matched in, you got a low I rating in a higher category, you're going to have guys with fast cars that aren't the best drivers, probably going to, encourage accidents to happen more around you. And the worst incident points are the ones that you didn't cause. Moving on to the third and final step is every single person I've ever seen start with iRacing stuffs up the starts and stuffs up the pit entry. And this is prevalent in all of the categories. Maybe NASCAR is one of the easier ones. Sprint cars, I know, like you jump in, you'll be in the sprint car, you just want to go out and rip some laps, make some dirt fly. And you go to just drive out of the pits onto the track and you start getting black flags. And you're like, what happened? Turns out that was the yellow entry cone, not exit, and the pit's all the way around the other side. So a lot of the time, I think it's on Lanier especially, Lanier Speedway. Don't know if you guys do dirt. You have to drive past the pit entry all the way around, 3/4 of a lap to the pit exit. So you have to look for the green cones. Also going with this to avoid pit speeding limits or pit false entries or illegal entries and exits. I really want you to take the time to go through your settings, look for pit limiter, bind it to a button, because some classes have an auto pit limiter and some won't. And guess how you find that out? You come in, you expect the limiter to come on, and it doesn't happen because that class doesn't have an automatic one. So get in the habit of binding, mine's just that button there, binding your pit limiter, and get used to using it. You got to hit that certain threshold. As you come up to the pits, it'll let you know what it is, get it down below that, and activate it. So there's your pit entries. Also along the lines of that is your starts. Don't get a false start. There's particular ways that you can do so. You want to bind a clutch if you have one. You can also button press it. Don't rev it to full on max throttle because you'll just squirrel and into a wreck. Best thing is to just take off nice and slow. And in order to not get a false start, you want to, if you don't have a clutch, just start in neutral and you can change up a gear. Won't be pro, but you just want to avoid, if you can, getting a false start and illegal pit entries. So those are 3 tips for iRacing, and we'll move on to ACC. So number 1, ACC, the new Assetto Corsa, is there actually is, for the newcomers, everyone that's played the game for a while will know this, but there actually is a sense of a rating progression that I don't think they show enough, they don't introduce you to it enough. So on the main screen, if you go under your character, you can look at your rating and things like that. You'll see a list of tracks with 3 stars on each ones that you can fully complete. And you'll see that a lot of them probably won't have been completed. This is based just purely on your ability to drive the track, your speed, your smoothness, and things like that. It's all listed. As well as that, you have, I think, 5 different criterias of your driving ability, including safety rating, including car control, so not sliding it, including track pace, including, it's very detailed. And there's actually a sense of progression here. And what I mean by that is, it gives you something to do. And rather than just jump on and be like, oh, what do I do? Join multiplayer when I don't know tracks. You should go through, try every different track, and it includes hot laps, includes racing, single player, just with AI, do the career and such, and build up these 3 stars or thereabouts on all of the different tracks, then you have a really good sound knowledge of your tracks, and you have an objective to go and do. And objectives to do keep you more interested in playing the game. Then you can move on to your different 5 or 6 categories of your driving ability, and by getting those 3 stars in the tracks, you already find you've got, I think, at least the first 2 pretty high, and you can move on to the other ones, working your way up the ranks. And in doing this, you'll work your safety rating up. That's heavily influenced from driving around other cars and being in close proximity. So that includes them from AI, so don't be wrecking into AI because they're not like a real life person, because it will tank your ability to actually enter multiplayer races. That's the first thing. Look for the rating progression, the sense of progression in the game. You just have to source it yourself. It doesn't really throw it in your face every time you log on. Number 2 is the setups in ACC, like every game, can make or break the game, but more so than I thought. So I had a huge problem when I first started playing ACC. The first thing was I'd rest my foot on the brake, and if the game senses any sign of input from the brake, the ABS and traction control just spaz out and will shutter the car, and it will drive really weird and really slow. And I couldn't work out what was happening because it doesn't do it in other games until I realized that the red bar was kind of like shuddering and doing like weird things under. It's hard to see because it's way over here on this triple monitor. But first things first, don't touch a brake. And secondly is if you want to actually like play the game proper and make it feel like a simulator, you got to turn down, even on the aggressive presets for some of the cars, you have to turn down traction control. You have to turn down your anti-skid braking. It just assists crazy. It actually works in ACC. I think that's the major thing. A lot of games it just doesn't work. You can crank it up. It doesn't really do a whole lot. This one's huge. Got to turn it down. If you turn it down to level 1 or 2, the car is wild to drive, and it actually feels like a high horsepower race car, which is exactly what I'm trying to simulate personally. So there's that. Another thing is the engine maps, okay? And it doesn't really have written words of what they are. You have to kind of find out yourself. But let's take the Bentley, for example. There's 8 engine maps, right? You don't know what they mean. You just tick it through and put it on a random one with your tinker around setups. Don't do that. They're hugely different. For instance, the Bentley number 1's the fastest. It's just like race pace. So if you were to put it on number 2 or 3, that's like an endurance setting made for saving fuel. So obviously you're not going to go as fast. Even more, if you move on to 4, it's just completely slow. If you move on to 5, you're set up for wet. So if you don't want to be set up for wet on a nice, fast, dry track, because it's going to limit your pace, okay? So you want to not tinker with the maps unless you know what they do. And even then, you can like really get intense, bind all that stuff, start tinkering with it as you're driving, just as the real GT3 drivers would do. And kind of stemming into number 3, not the biggest tip, but it is helpful in all games. I've started doing it more, especially with ACC. So at the start of the race, you'll have cold tyres. They're way more encouraged to spin, slide, until they get up to temperature. And they're very good in their temperature, in how the game kind of simulates it. So the first thing is, normally the game overpressurizes your tyres a little bit. You want them, from what I heard, I haven't tested running a tyre pressure at this up to pace and comparing my track times. But generally what you want to aim for, I've seen written around, is 26 degrees hot. The game will normally set your tyre pressure to, when you get into the middle of a race, it's running a little bit hot, about 27. So let's try, just tick it down a few times from your stock setup. And another little tip to pair with that is you can turn your traction up, if you have it bound to a button, the start of a race. You won't spin as easy. You do 2 laps until tyres up to pace, or up to heat. You can check in the corner, knock it back down to where you had it, and you're good to go, with less likely that you're going to get into a spin early on in the race, because we know how hectic first laps can get. They can just turn into absolute like shit shows, honestly. There's the 3 tips for both ACC and iRacing. Pretty beginner, but this was titled for things I wish I knew when I first begun. Hopefully it helps. Be sure to like and subscribe, and I will see you guys next time.